A friend of mine recently bought this really cheap game for me. It's called Country Justice: Revenge of the Rednecks, and it's a first-person shooter developed by 3 Romans and published by valu-soft. I figured since there doesn't seem to be a lot of information about this game on the internet, I'd do my own review trying to show up everything about this game so that you can decide for yourself if it's really one of the worst games ever, as a lot of people seem to think. First, there's the game's trailer, which I'm going to play now.
Steve Earl! Steve Earl, do you hear me?
Yo, cuz, you remember dancing on the hood of Cletus's Jeep? Something's wrong in this town.
I see you have made it, Redneck. You are too late. One last item to take care of. This will do it. And now it has begun. I will sacrifice my body and bring on the new world order. My DNA will be spread throughout the world, and everyone will know the strength of my movement.
Now I'm really mad.
Okay, so that trailer isn't really in the game. You actually play as this hick, who finds some radioactive chemical or something in the river. Eventually we see that this chemical is coming from a pipe of some kind, so I guess it's up to us, the Redneck, to fight the evil corporation that ruined the environment, or something like that. Then the game starts to load, and your eye is immediately drawn to this big tree in the middle of the screen that just kinda looks like they copied the same branch about 100 times with the clone stamp tool. Thankfully, the game takes about 20 minutes to load, so you have plenty of time to appreciate it. Then, right away, we meet our hero, the redneck simply known as Steve Earl.
Steve Earl, do you hear me? Dixie's gone! Somebody kidnapped our goat! I bet it was those dang Hatfields. I called Sheriff Cletus, but he ain't gonna do nothing! So you gotta go take care of him once and for all. And don't even try and come back without Dixie.
His wife and sister has quite an annoying voice, but her heart is in the right place.
This here ain't no time for drinking.
So, Steve Earl embarks on a quest to figure out who stole his goat.
Where's my truck keys? Skeeter'll know.
First, he tries to get himself acquainted with the people at the trailer park, but they do not cooperate, so he hits them with a baseball bat.
Watch it, Redneck.
Thank you very much.
So, you're walking around, trying to figure out where the hell Skeeter could be, when suddenly you're attacked by a 3-headed dog, with no explanation.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
The atmosphere of this game is really scary. Thankfully, the dog takes about 700 bullets before it dies, so PETA has nothing to complain about. By now, Steve Earl was starting to think that his aim was not so good, so he tried to do a shooting gallery of sorts, but discovered that the controls do not exactly work. In fact, he can't hit crap, even though it's 2 feet in front of him with no obstacles.
No one does that to Steve Earl and gets away with it.
Steve Earl finds Skeeter's house, which, for whatever reason, has radioactive eggs scattered all across the lawn. He goes inside and talks to Skeeter, who really has nothing important to say.
Yo, cuz, do you remember dancing on the hood of Cletus's Jeep? Boy, you were wasted.
The constant sound of gunfire in the background just makes the scene a million times better.
Woo! What a ride. I was seeing things. No pink elephants, but dang close. I put your truck keys into the mailbox. I need something to drink.
After that, you'll notice that Skeeter owns a TV from JVC. They're probably regretting that product placement now. So, Steve Earl tries to search Skeeter's house for any clues. He finds a map on the counter, which, for whatever reason, contains every single map in the entire game. Apparently Skeeter has top-secret maps of government facilities just lying around in a trailer park. Then, when Steve Earle went out the door, he saw the most horrifying thing. A bunch of mutated chicken monsters hatched from their eggs and killed Skeeter's dog.
That's enough.
Now, Steve Earle had had enough, and knew he just had to get out of there. Thankfully, even though Steve Earle's truck is somehow half his height, he's still able to drive it away. Unfortunately, Steve Earle found that his radio station's dial wouldn't move, and he was stuck listening to the worst radio station known to mankind. Steve Earle discovered that the world outside the trailer park was pretty much just a lot of copy-pasted trees, a crapload of horses, and really bad driving controls. It's a good thing Steve Earle's truck is invincible, or he would have been dead a long time ago. Traveling along on his quest, Steve Earle came across a horrifying sight. It looked like there was someone in trouble on the road. So he parked his truck to give them a hand.
Where did they come from?
Unfortunately, when he tried to help, the bodies rose up like zombies and started puking all over him.
I don't care what you are. You're going down.
And Steve Earle was forced to admit that there might be something worse happening than just a missing goat. Soon, Steve Earle came across some kind of weird walled-in rectangle of land, surrounded by thousands of horses and cows. I have no idea why. Steve Earle figured out that he needed to follow the green color on his compass, which eventually brought him to a hearse that was stranded near the road. Steve Earle didn't even care anymore. He just wanted to get some moonshine, but he couldn't deal with the really scary-looking cows and ended up dying. Holy crap, those things are scary. Steve Earle came to try again and avoid the cows so he could get his moonshine. But this was easier said than done.
Looks like I'll be walking from here.
Steve Earle made it to the bridge, but found it blocked off by a truck. He went around on foot so he could talk to the sheriff.
Get in, Steve Earle. We got some business to take care of. Those scientists have your goat. I saw them take her into the nuke plant.
Now, even though there's thousands of mutated horses and cows taking over the world and killing everybody, Cletus still just wants to save our goat, and we're just a simple redneck. So, we go along with Cletus and use a Gatling gun to kill everything in the way.
Alright.
The controls are really bad, but thankfully the horses don't do very much damage, so everything is okay.
Is that the best you can do? Go help them out, and then meet me by the barn with the winch.
So, even though Steve Earle's sister said that the Hatfields were trouble, he still wanted to help them out, because no one deserves to be eaten by horses, not even the Hatfields, who are apparently three identical triplets standing so close together that you can clearly tell that they use the same model. But when Steve Earle tried to help, they shot him right in the stomach. Steve Earle wasn't really sure what he was supposed to do at this point, so he tried again a few times, but no matter what, the Hatfields always tried to kill him, so he decided that they probably didn't need his help anyway.
Run away!
Running around the Hatfields farm, Steve Earle noticed that the animal placement in this game really doesn't make any sense. Most of the cows and horses are just placed at complete random, not even in a fenced area or anything resembling a place where they might actually be. Thankfully, the horses in Steve Earle's world are immune to fear, so they just stand around calmly munching on grass during a zombie apocalypse. By the time he was done conversing with the horses, Steve Earle saw that the Hatfields were dead and it was now safe to break into their house. First, he would need to steal all their weapons because he thought that that's what they would have wanted him to do. After getting through the house, Steve Earle found a whole bunch of moonshine lying around on the ground for no apparent reason. He continued into the barn, which was illuminated by medieval torches for some reason. This is where Steve Earle encountered his first real obstacle in the game, a ladder. Steve Earle knew that there must be something up there, or else why would they put a ladder here in the game? But actually climbing up the ladder was easier said than done, and Steve Earle found himself stuck in the environment as the game wildly flung him all over the place. He was starting to think that maybe his world does not have the best programming. When he got to the top, Steve Earle found some more useless moonshine and a door that wouldn't open. This crap was really starting to piss him off. Eventually, he figured out that all he had to do was open the garage door and he could continue on his quest.
Now, let's go get your little truck, boy.
After some completely pointless backtracking, Cletus arrived at the bridge.
Those scientists got animals crossbreeding. Kinda sounds like a family, huh? You'll need that catapult. Use it to blow the nuke plant gate, and I'll meet you there.
Steve Earle was finally reunited with his truck, and Cletus left him a catapult that he could apparently use to blow down the nuke plant that had kidnapped his goat. When he arrived at the nuke plant, he found out that it didn't really have any security worth mentioning. It seemed to be guarded exclusively by one dude in a uniform and about 100 cows that don't actually attack or do any damage. He decided the best thing to do would be to run over the dude and make his way from there. Steve Earle then discovered that the wall he was supposed to blow down with his catapult was an illusion, and he could just drive through it without doing anything. Steve Earle knew that he was seeing things, and swore to himself that he would never drink so much moonshine ever again. Eventually, Steve Earle emerged into the facility, and he figured that this must be where they were producing that green chemical from before. But before he could do anything, the game tried to save his progress and gave him extreme whiplash as it jittered back and forth for 20 minutes, struggling to load the second half of the game world. Steve Earle eventually woke up from his deranged loading coma and saw that the rest of the facility was basically just a straight path with giant arrows telling him exactly where to go. After a while, Steve Earle got to the exit of what was apparently a high-security government facility, even though he just drove through with no resistance at all. Cletus was waiting for him on the other side.
Boy, I could have told you that ain't the way in. You gotta go by boat. Meet me in town.
Man, I hate going in the jailhouse. Nothing good ever happens there.
By this point, Steve Earle was beginning to think that the soundtrack for this game was extremely annoying, and decided to turn it off for his own sanity. As he tried to follow Cletus to the courthouse, the game began to do everything it could do to stop him from proceeding. The game started chugging and crashing my computer in what I can only assume is an attempt to simulate a bad moonshine reaction. I held an intervention for Steve Earle to force him to admit that he had a problem, but the problems still persisted for quite a while until I finally gave up and restarted my computer. I decided to turn off all the fancy graphics settings so I could actually play the game, since the PS1 era graphics were apparently too much for my brand new computer to handle. Unfortunately, doing that caused the game to run way too fast, and Steve Earle found himself struggling to stay on the road with some of the worst driving controls in a video game. Steve Earle made it to the town after much hardship, but all was not well. He parked next to Cletus as normally as he could, and started to explore the town a little bit. It soon became obvious that Steve Earle's voice actor is a big Elvis fan, who reads his lines straight off the Wikipedia page.
The history of rock and roll stemmed from rhythm and blues and gospel.
The game then explores surrealism in a postmodern world, as the woman at the courthouse mouths words without making any noise.
Yes, ma'am.
Somehow Steve Earle understands her, which is probably symbolic of how the developers want to give a voice to the voiceless, and clearly not just a programming error. Steve Earle then tried to go to court, but he was immediately asked if he wanted to play a minigame instead. The minigame locked him to the floor and asked him to shoot all the mutants without moving, but the game kept lagging and dropping frames, so the mutants would just jerk forward unexpectedly and kill Steve Earle before he could react. He tried doing the minigame again, but the game's programming had sunk to a new low. Eventually, Steve Earle figured out where he was supposed to go next, and explored the rest of this building. He found a map, which did absolutely nothing. Then he tried to proceed.
I'm locking you up for your own good. These things are dangerous. Someone needs to take the swamp boat up to the plant and stop those scientists.
Steve Earle spent at least half an hour running around the jail, aimlessly trying to figure out where to go, or what the hell he was supposed to be doing. He found a key in one of the cells, but it didn't actually appear to do anything. He discovered that he could actually jump through the ceiling, but this fact didn't seem to help him out very much. After a certain amount of time, the game randomly decided to load the next part of the game, which caused a hole to appear from which he could escape. By this point, the entire town seemed to be overrun by mutants, so Steve Earle just made a run for the boat that he would need to enter the facility, even though he already entered it earlier by driving through the doors. For some reason, he needed a boat to enter it again from a different side, or something like that. Steve Earle couldn't help but notice that the water in this game was dirtier than the Detroit River. He assumed it was supposed to be a swamp, but really it just looked like an ocean of mud. He found the boat he needed for his quest, which was guarded by a redneck who looked suspiciously similar to Skeeter from before. Luckily, this redneck was completely comatose and wouldn't even respond to shots to the face. Steve Earle went ahead and stole the redneck's boat, noticing that the game's model animator was clearly on vacation for this part of the game.
Oh, this rocks.
But Steve Earle didn't care because he was too excited to finally have another vehicle available. Unfortunately, Steve Earle forgot to take into account the fact that he had no idea how to drive a boat at all. The game simulated this with even worse driving controls, which caused the boat to randomly veer left and right and flip over, defying all common sense or basic knowledge of how a boat would work. Thankfully, the boat was capable of driving over land just as easily as water, so the ridiculously poor controls didn't matter very much. Eventually, Steve Earle managed to make his way through some narrow waterways, which was really hard with the boat constantly running into the sides, and found himself approaching the government facility where they were holding his goat. The facility's alternative entrance was illuminated by some Victorian oil lamps and a walkway that sounded like metal, even though it's clearly made of wood. If you can figure out what the hell is going on in this story anymore, my hat's off to you, because I'm deeply confused and disturbed. Steve Earle entered the pipe that led into the facility. Once inside, he approached the elevator and heard the sound of someone writing it down. Then the sound effect gave up, and Steve Earle was forced to use his imagination until the guards got to the bottom. The game didn't have any kind of accurate aiming or any kind of strafing system, so Steve Earle was forced to use the peekaboo method, which really didn't work.
Well, that's enough.
After killing the guards, Steve Earle continued through the rest of the facility. This is probably the best part of the game.
Well, this is crazy.
Unfortunately, the game went haywire trying to load the next level, and loaded and unloaded itself repeatedly for a few minutes before crashing my computer. When the game finally started to work again, Steve Earle was no longer joking around. He was so close to his goal that he could smell it. But the game once again started throwing tons of lag in an attempt to keep him from his goal. But Steve Earle would not give up, and eventually he persevered until he found the mad scientist who was responsible for all of this madness.
I see you have made it, Redneck. You are too late.
Steve Earle was so shocked at the ridiculous villain that he couldn't even react. He found himself glued to the floor in utter shock.
One last item to take care of. This will do it. And now it has begun. There is only one way to deliver this. I will sacrifice my body and bring on the new world order. My DNA will be spread throughout the world, and everyone will know the strength of my movement.
So the words at the top of the screen told Steve Earle that he needed to use dynamite to free his goat Dixie, but Steve Earle didn't actually have any dynamite, so he decided to go for plan B, which was to randomly fire at the control panel. Steve Earle didn't expect this to work, but
You've ruined everything. You.
unfortunately the game didn't seem to know what to do and wouldn't let Steve Earle free Dixie, even though he had already destroyed the villain's evil plan. As Steve Earle tried to leave without his goat, but he got stuck in the floor and had to restart the game. Steve Earle did eventually figure out how to free his goat, but the game still wouldn't let him leave. He was starting to feel like the developers were simply too lazy to give the game an ending. He tried letting the clock run out to see what would happen, and basically the same exact cutscene plays for some reason, and then the game randomly says you have died and asks you to restart. So, as far as I know, this is the end of the game. It's been a long ride, but in the end, Steve Earle did save his goat and killed the mad scientist. Whoever he was, I really don't know. But the point is, well, in conclusion, Country Justice Revenge of the Rednecks really isn't the worst game ever. There are clearly much worse games in existence, but it's probably one of the most depressing games I've ever played, in the sense that the game actually had a lot of potential that it completely missed, because 3 Romans and valu-soft care more about getting the game out at a low price than actually bothering to finish it. I get the idea that it was meant to be a bargain bin game from the start, but that doesn't excuse the piece of crap that we ended up getting as the final product. So, in conclusion, the game sucks. A lot. If you enjoyed this review, you should check out the rest of my channel. I don't normally do game reviews, but you might still find my other work funny. This is Brian Rainey, and I'm sorry about doing this accent for the entire video. I'm really not sure what I was thinking, and if I offended anyone, I deeply apologize. I'd also like to apologize to the Rednecks of America. Please don't send me angry letters, assuming that you know how to write. Yeah, this is awkward. Bye.